All right, well, welcome to our session today. We're going to be talking about some of the tips and tricks, do's and don'ts, gotchas, booby traps for security leaders who are just stepping into this role or been in this role and trying to mature and evolve your security program. My name is Victor Monga. I am CISO and adjunct professor at VTF. With me today, I have Dr. Eric Cole, the guy who does not need introduction. He is CEO and co-founder at Secure Anchor. He is a distinguished professor at SANS as well. I met Dr. Eric Cole first time when I was taking Sec 401, and it's been a great journey since then. I've been following his path. I've been following his journey as well. He's going to give you tips and tricks, not just about cybersecurity, about health as well, so that it's very important for us to keep on following him as well. So with that, Dr. Cole, welcome. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you for having me, my friend.
Excellent. So, Dr. Cole, I think, as I said, this session is about our friends who are technical enough or who were technical as security engineer, architect, manager, director, and inheriting a security program as a leader now. What's the first thing would you recommend those people that, hey, this is one thing that you want to start with?
It's so important to remember that a security engineer is a technical track and a CISO is a strategic business track. They are two completely different roles, and they require an entire shift in how you view the problem. As a security engineer or technical in nature, you're really focused on identifying problems, looking for vulnerabilities, and doing whatever is necessary in order to secure the enterprise. As a chief information security officer, it's always important to remember the outer layers. You're a chief officer. Chief officers are focused on growth, stability, revenue, and profitability of the business. That is your top priority. You just so happen to utilize cybersecurity as a way to do that, but you are not a technical analyst. You are a strategist focusing on solutions to solve the business problems. So it's a completely different mind shift where if you start going in and talking about firewalls and IDSs and vulnerabilities and exposures, you're going to be shut out of the meeting fairly quickly. If you talk about revenue, profits, growth, and acceptable risk, all of a sudden you're going to be in the right swim lane. So it's a completely different mindset in how you have to look at the problem.
That's absolutely right. So, Dr. Cole, let's talk about a case study from both sides, both spectrums. One is where a person who stepped into a CISO role from a technical background and very excited to inherit that role. Again, read the fine print, guys and girls. But now they have to get into this business mindset. They have always been an IT technical mindset, and now they have to shift that to talk about business language. But it's not always natural because we have a tendency as technical people to roll up our sleeves and to your point, firewalls, IDS, EDR, XDR, we want to talk about the language that the board or executives will be like, yeah, you are nerd, you're a geek. Let's just keep it at your bay. How does that switch happens? It doesn't happen organically. I'm sure it needs a little bit of training and a shift in the mindset and the day-to-day as well. So instead of reading dark reading and instead of reading those articles that we have been accustomed to, now you got to read about a little bit about the business revenue to your point. How do you encourage those CISOs who are technical background trying to shift into the business mindset? What do they do to make that shift in their day-to-day life?
First and most important, and you nailed it, the longer you are a security engineer, the harder it is to switch to a CISO. Because if you've been doing something for 10 or 12 years, you're good at it. It's what you know, and it's what you love. So that's why I think one of the biggest misnomers and mistakes in the industry is the way you become a CISO is you become a security engineer for 12 to 15 years, and then you get promoted up to a CISO. That is actually the hardest path possible, and you're making it so difficult. If you're thinking you want to be a CISO, 3 to 4 years is the sweet spot. After you've done security for 3 or 4 years, you want to start getting more into management, start reading more business books, start getting more into understanding financial statements and profitability and the business and strategy and how the organization works. Because you're right, the longer you've done technical, the harder it is to switch. You're thrown in that role first and foremost, and this is really hard for technical people. Don't make any major changes for 90 days. One of the biggest mistakes I see is these security engineers come in there and it's like they're down in Texas as the new sheriff in town, and they just want to show their value, prove their worth. And basically, they come in and are like, this firewall stinks, and this IDS is bad, and we need this SIM in place. And they basically disrupt the entire organization. They cause confusion with their entire security team because now they forget that entire infrastructure was built by their security team. So if you're coming in and saying this infrastructure is awful and you need to rebuild it, you've basically isolated your entire team. You told them their baby's ugly, that what they did was wrong, and that basically you lost all support. Plus, you're going to confuse the heck out of executives because you're going to ask for all this money, all these changes, and it's going to cause all this disruption. So what you want to do is come in for the first 90 days, listen, observe, understand, and spend as much time with the executives as you possibly can. You should be meeting with the CEO, the COO, the CFO, the chief legal counsel, vice presidents, directors. Your calendar should be booked full with meetings with the executives because you want to understand the business, learn the business, and basically baptism by fire. So when I work with new CISOs that are struggling, I can guarantee two things. One, when I look at their calendar, they're spending way too much time with their technical folks and not enough with the business. And second, they're spending too much time trying to rebuild and re-engineer as opposed to understand and observe. So I really focus on listening, asking lots of questions, and not trying to provide all the answers.
When is the right time to know that as a new leader who stepped into this role, been doing technical from past 2 decades, when is the right time to know that, hey, this is not my jam? I really enjoy being in the weeds. I really enjoy learning the technology. I really enjoy engineering the technology. Is there a right time to know that, hey, maybe let's fold and let's encourage someone else to take on the role who's the right fit?
So the reality is you're going to know within a few weeks whether that's what you want to do. Now, it could take you years to master it. So I want to be careful. Just because it takes you a while and you're not good at it doesn't mean you can't do it. So if you're like, I love this strategy, I love this business, but I just feel like I'm in over my head, I'm like, let's just break it down into chunks. Let's start peeling off the key pieces that you need to do and just give yourself a couple of years. But you'll know within a couple of weeks whether you like the strategy, you like the high level. And to me, it's real simple. Here's a real easy quiz I give everybody. You're sitting at your desk and you get a call from the CEO of the company that one of your major servers have just been hacked. It's just been compromised and the attacker's in the network. What do? If your answer to me is you run into the data center, you start running logs, you start looking at scripts, you start putting together IDS, and you start trying to block, detect, and control the environment, congratulations. You're a world-class security engineer, and I can't change that. If
Right.
your response, though, is you immediately start notifying your team, you have a meeting, you start delegating to team members what to do, gathering information, you then act as the head of the central command, you gather your data and information, you report it back to the executives, congratulations, you're a chief information security officer. So it's really more of what do you enjoy to do? Do you enjoy the hands-on technical, the problem solving, where you're the hero, you're the smartest person in the room, security engineer, or do you like the strategy, the overseeing, having other smart people work for you, and you just guiding and directing the momentum? And it's one of those where you can learn the skill, but it's sort of innate in your DNA. You either love one or the other.
Yeah, and you said it right? If either you want to be the smartest person in the room or you want to surround yourself with the smartest people so that you can actually leverage them and delegate the work. So I think that's what it really boils down to. And there's nothing wrong learning technology, knowing the things as a CISO as well. Yes, you can learn it, I think, but at the end of the day, don't get your hands dirty. Make sure that your day is filled with a strategy And as a hobby, feel free to learn as much as you want, right? Dr. Cole, what do you have to say about that?
Exactly. It's what gives you excitement, what gives you joy, what really energizes you. And one of the things I've learned is when everyone is born, they really have an innate appetite for one of three areas. They're called the artist, the leader, or the entrepreneur. The artist is your security engineer. They love to create, they love to find new solutions, they love to research, they love to find vulnerabilities, that they love to find exploits. Leader is more your CISO, where they love to lead, they love to guide, they love to direct. And then entrepreneur is they love to build businesses. It's all about revenue, selling businesses. Those are also good CISOs, but if they're not given enough freedom, they might get bored because they like to be in charge and run the show. And the reality is, figure out which one you are.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because if you're a natural artist and that's what you love to do, you could be a CISO. I can train you to be a CISO, but you're going to struggle. And if you're a natural entrepreneur and you try to be a security engineer, you're also going to struggle because that's not your jam. So it's really people need to say there's nothing wrong with a security engineer. We sort of have this misnomer that if you're a security engineer for 8 or 10 years and you don't get promoted to a CISO, you failed. And that's just not true. You could be a chief scientist. You can be world class at what you do. I know some world class security engineers that make a heck of a lot more money than CISOs do. So it's just knowing what you love and just honoring it and not trying to force yourself into be somebody you're not.
Absolutely right. Now let's talk about the other side of that spectrum where someone who's not technical at all and they inherited a CISO role, but they're really not understanding the solutions or they're really not understanding what the security is doing because a lot of technical controls are highly technical. So what advice would you give them because they feel like they don't belong there because they have no technical background and yet they are in this technical field of being a CISO?
In those cases, it's they either need to recognize they need to learn some of the basic language and they just need to be open with their team. It's hard because I would tell you, security engineers don't accept outsiders very well.
Yeah.
So if you have a group of really brilliant security engineers that have been doing it for 8 or 10 years, and you put some MBA running them that doesn't even know a firewall, an IDS, or a TCP/IP protocol, it's going to be a little rough, and they just need to recognize that, hey, that's par for the course. My recommendation is take some courses, like you said, 401 or others, learn some of the basic language, learn some of the basic understanding, but really in those cases, get yourself a deputy,
Yeah.
somebody who can help translate that role. Because what you have to remember is world-class CISOs are world-class translators. They can speak cybersecurity, they can speak business, and they can translate on the fly back and forth. So the example I give is they can be walking down the hall, they can run into a security engineer and be talking about false positives, protocols, and adjusting the filtering of the IP headers. They can run into a CEO and immediately talk about acquisitions, mergers, and profitability. They can then get in an elevator, run into a director, and talk about software management, development, and scheduling. And they need to be comfortable in all those environments. Typically, you're weaker in one, so you need to really work on that weaker area. If you're weaker in business, learn business. If you're weaker in cyber, learn that. But if you can only speak one language and you're supposed to translate, you're going to struggle. So you either need to learn the language really, really quickly or get a deputy that can help you with the translation.
That's absolutely right. Now let's talk about a little bit, not controversial topic, but more delicate topic where in the past 5 to 8 years, CISO's role have evolved. It has got a lot of scrutiny. It has a lot of become a sensitive role within an organization where if you're taking on a CISO role, then you really need to read the fine print. Who do you report to? What your powers are? Where the delegation, roles of responsibility? What can you report and what can be done? Recently in the industry, everyone who's taken on a CISO role is really taking that as they're running it through the lawyers and all that. With all that responsibility and all that scrutiny, what advice would you give them who are just either taking on a role or considering a CISO role, that this is what really boils down to being a CISO?
So you're spot on. So first and foremost, you have to figure out, are you really a CISO? Or are you just given the 4 letters as a title to check a box? So in my opinion, and once again, you said controversial, so I know there's going to be some people getting mad at me at this. If you're given the title of a CISO and you're reporting to the CIO, you're not a CISO. You're essentially a scapegoat. You're not really going to have much authoritative position on strategy, and you're really just a glorified security engineer. Because the reality is, if you're buried under the CIO is responsible for uptime availability. That's how they get bonus. They can tell you what they want. I've had CIOs look me in the face and say, Eric, even though I'm bonused on uptime availability, I still weigh security properly. And my response is, does your family members know you lie, or do you just do it to me and when you're in public, right? Because what you get compensated on is what you're going to get put on. So if you're buried under the CIO, you're not a CISO. You're essentially a scapegoat. So when a breach happens, they can fire you and not the CIO. So you got to understand the reporting structure. Could it work if you really get along with the CIO? Yes, but the reality is you're not a CISO. If you're reporting to the COO, CFO, one of the other Cs, then you are a CISO, but you need to remember your second tier, because that the first tier is COO, CEO, CFO. A real CISO reports to the CEO. A real CISO is part of the top 5. You have CEO, COO, CFO, CISO, and Chief Legal Counsel. That's a real CISO. You're part of the executive board. You sit on the executive suite. You attend all the meetings with the other executives. I would say that's probably less than 5% of all CISOs fit under that category. It might only be 2 or 3%. Very rare, but we're seeing more and more companies take that position seriously. So you have to look at who do you report to. Then you have to look at where do you sit. If all the executives are sitting in the executive suite and you're sitting with the IT team, you're viewed more as an IT technical resource than you are an executive. So the second thing you want to look at is where do you sit? Third thing that you want to look at is how are you compensated? Real executives, real chief officers get a okay salary, but they get a pretty big bonus. Yeah. So if you're not bonused based on how the company is doing and how the company is doing profits and revenues, you're probably not a real CISO. So those are just some of the things you want to take into account. And then the other thing you want to do is, if you are a real CISO, there could be corporate liability. So then I think you said, then you need to make sure you're getting umbrella insurance, E&O coverage, and all those other factors. So if you, like we see with some of these cases where they're going after the CISO and suing them directly, you have protection, you have coverage, and you have somebody in your court. So you want to look at all the variables of who you're reporting to, where you're sitting, what you're getting paid, what the bonusing is, what the fiscal responsibility is, to really determine if you're a CISO. And then the last piece is how many people report to you. If you have nobody reporting to you, you're not a CISO. You're a security engineer. You have 2 people reporting to you. You're a manager, not a CISO. So it's one of those where companies will throw around the CISO title, but you're really not playing the role of a CISO. They're just doing it to check a box. So look at all the variables and ask yourself, is this truly a CISO position, or is this really a security engineer disguised as a CISO?
And that's absolutely right. I think let's talk about, if an organization is offering you a CISO role with 1 or 2 people or no direct reports, is it worth just declining it and saying, hey, don't give me a CISO title, maybe give me a manager, senior manager title, and my compensation is accordingly, so that I don't get a false hope and also don't get blamed for something that the company is trying to force upon me?
It depends on where you're at. So as you know, with most jobs, you need experience to get it. So one of the big issues is, if you've never been a CISO, nobody wants to hire you as a CISO. Yeah. Now, it's false there, because if you look at every successful CISO, they had a job where they were hired as the first CISO. So saying that nobody will ever hire you as a CISO if you've never been a CISO is false, because then nobody would ever become a CISO. But getting that CISO title on your CV is helpful. So what I'll give to my clients that I coach and my students in my CISO certification program is, if you really want to become a CISO and you've had trouble getting a CISO position and somebody will give you the CISO title, as long as you recognize it's short term, you recognize it's going to be a 9 to 12 transition and you use it as a learning, but it's not going to be long term. And within 6 to 7 months, you're going to be putting your resume back on the street again and looking for another job. It's a transitional step. I am okay with that. And I'm fine with you taking the CISO title as long as you're fully aware you're probably not going to be doing a CISO, but it checks the box for your CV and helps you with career promotion.
Yeah. All right. Let's switch gears. I think we talked a lot about the role, the function, the hierarchy. Let's talk about two other topics that every CISO is either reading upon or actually discussing: zero trust and NIST CSF. We'll start with zero trust. There's so much out there. I think every vendor, you walk up the RSA Expo Hall, every vendor has zero trust and AI just plastered all over their booth.
Yeah.
What is really CISO have to do when it comes to zero trust? Where do they start? There's so much, and it's not even a blinky box that you can buy and be done with. It's a journey, it's a mindset. So where to start and where to end? There is no end in my book, actually, when you come to zero trust. But what's your opinion on it, Dr. Cole?
I mean, to me, cybersecurity is an area that for some reason we love our buzzwords.
Yeah.
We love our buzzwords, niches, and this and that. And to me, I laugh because we've been doing zero trust before there was zero trust, right? Zero trust is really just good sound architecture. Isolating systems, isolating resources, limiting the flow of data, segmentation. I mean, it's all security 101 things that I've been teaching for the last 20 years. And now we just go in and call it zero trust. So to me, it's not bad because we're just putting a label on what we know, but make sure that what is the actual solution or outcome. Don't just buy something because it says zero trust, because there's a lot of stuff out there that says zero trust that I wouldn't trust at all, right? So there's definitely no zero in that trust, or maybe there is zero in that trust. I zero trust it. So you just gotta stay away from the buzzwords and just look at what are we trying to accomplish? What is our goal? If it's isolation and segmentation, then let's look at NAC solutions, quarantining solutions. If we're looking for detection of advanced attacks, let's go in and look at correlation and analytics and behavioral detection solutions. And whether they call it zero trust or not, I wouldn't really pay a lot of attention to it. Focus on what the solution is actually doing. And it's the same thing with AI. Everything is AI. And I went in and I looked at a company and they're like, advanced AI analytics. And all they're doing is taking rules, looking in logs, and setting off alerts. I'm like, that's called log analysis signature based. That's not artificial intelligence, right? So it's one of those things where to label technology with buzzwords, there's no requirement. It's not like with food or beverages. If you're going to say something is fat-free, there's certain requirements you have to meet. Right. If you say something is organic, there's certain requirements. You can't just claim you're doing it. Unfortunately, with technology, none of that exists.
Yeah.
I could have a piece of software that is a clock and I can call it AI. I can have a piece of software that's a calculator and call it zero trust. So I'm one, ignore the buzzwords. Don't get caught up in it. Don't let it dissuade you to put in new technology. Focus on what is the problem. What is the problem you're trying to solve? And it's so funny because I go to these big events and people come up, well, what do you think of this product? We're thinking of buying it in our organization. And I ask them a simple question. Well, what problem are you trying to solve? Like, no, Eric, you're not hearing me. We just think this would be cool tech and we want to know what you think of it. And I'm like, well, what is the problem you're trying to solve? And it's like, I'm speaking a foreign language. Yeah. We don't buy technology because it's cool. We shouldn't be. Most companies do. But the reason why most companies are a total and complete mess is because they bought a bunch of stuff based on buzzwords and good vendor sales pitches, and there wasn't any real problem they were trying to solve. What is your number one risk? What is the root cause problem? And then let's find solutions that minimize or reduce that risk.
Yeah. I have a funny way of actually articulating that as well. I always say that find the solutions for your problems that you have and you know of, and continue with your lab and POCs and POVs. If you just want to learn the technology, if you want to see it, how cool it is, just do a POC, POV, and be done with it. Like, don't actually bring it in, pay for it, train your staff, and don't know how to use it or don't know how where effective it is. Architect your solutions inside out instead of having vendors drive your architecture. Know what you want from inside out and then have vendors actually fit where it's needed and measure the effectiveness. That's been always my propaganda, where make sure that you measure the effectiveness, hold them accountable. Otherwise, they just keep adding, to your point, AI or advanced or next gen. But what does it actually do? How effective it is? That's been, I think, one of the things that I've been preaching the security leaders.
Yep.
Let's talk about the NIST CSF, and we'll wrap with this one. I know every security, at least in US, when security leaders are taking on the programs, they want to see a measurement of the program. And if they're not regulated agency or the organization, they don't have to comply with any of the HIPAAs or PCIs of the GDPR, CCPA of the world. They're like, we want to measure against something, and they pick CSF. And sometimes it works, they tailor it. But it can also be seen as, oh my God, we got to boil the ocean. And it's very subjective how every company does it. What's your guidance and approach when it comes to CSF?
I mean, to me, it's a great framework, but as you said, overly complex for most organizations, and get the basics down. The analogy I give is my friend was coaching a basketball team and he was going on vacation for a few weeks. So he asked me if I could fill in the coach for them. And I show up to the practice, and these kids are trying to do these behind the back, Michael Jordan, slam dunks, and then they're trying to do Kobe Bryant, 3-pointers from midcourt, and they're missing everything. And I'm like, let's just do some basics. They couldn't do layups. They couldn't do free throws, but they're trying to do all this advanced stuff because they thought it was cool. And I'm like, listen, I don't want to see a single fancy shot. I don't want to see a single 3-point. I don't want to see anything until you can master a layup. Because if we can't get basic points on the board with basic layups, you have no business doing the advanced stuff. And I find that's sort of what happens with the CSM is these companies aren't even getting the basics down, and they're trying to do all this advanced, and it's just chaos. So to me, it's real simple. First and foremost, what is your risk posture? If you don't have a risk posture, do not pass go, do not collect $200, do not even think of CSM, because you don't even know what is and is not acceptable risk. So you need to sit down with your executive team and say, what is the appropriate risk we're willing to accept?
Yeah.
And this is always a fun conversation, because every time I have it, they're like, oh, Eric, we don't want to accept any risk. We want to fix everything in the organization. And if you're a car fan, you'll appreciate this. Everybody wants Bugatti level security, but they want to pay for a Honda. And I'm like, this doesn't, and if you don't know cars, Bugatti's a $3 million automobile. So it's like, yeah, you want to pay a lot of money, I can give you Bugatti level security. But if you're only willing to pay a little bit, you got to be happy with a Honda and accept some risk. Nothing wrong with Hondas, by the way, but a different type of car. So the point is, you got to get the execs comfortable with accepting risk, understanding risk posture, and then just understanding the basic formula. Cybersecurity is not about yes or no. It's not about binary. It's not about a framework. It's simple. What is the value or benefit? What is the risk and exposure? And is the value worth the risk? So if I can get my executives and the vice presidents and directors and managers to understand the risk posture, understand looking at value and benefit, and say, is the value worth the risk? And is that within our risk posture? And we can get everyone operating in that manner, then maybe then we'll start layering in some CSM after that. But until you get your basics down, asset inventory, know your threats, your vulnerabilities, your risk posture, you get the basic blocking and tackling down, you shouldn't even be looking at any advanced framework.
Absolutely. 100%. 100%. All right. As we're wrapping up this session, any words of wisdom, Dr. Cole, that you would provide to our audience and our listeners?
The biggest thing is recognizing that cybersecurity, there's lots of areas you can work. Do what you love. Don't go after titles. Don't go, oh, I'm going to be a CISO because I think I'm going to make more money. If you love what you do, you can make a ton of money in a security engineer and an analyst in a CISO position. If you're going to become a CISO, do it because that's what you love. You love strategy, you love finances, you love business, you love growing organizations. But if you truly love the technical, hands-on bits and bytes, stay as a security engineer. You're going to be happier, you're going to be more successful, and you're going to succeed a lot more. Don't feel like you have to go into a CISO because it's required to grow. Do it because it's what you love to do.
Those CISOs who need additional guidance, Dr. Cole actually teaches some classes. Dr. Cole, would you like to give us some information about that as well?
Sure. So we have a CISO certification, which is a 6-month program. It's training. So you go through 40 hours of training. We have a whole curriculum you go through. You then have 6 months of coaching with me. So every single month you jump on a group coaching call for 2 hours and we do problem solving, coaching, enhancements. And then you also are part of a peer group where you can bounce questions off other folks. The reality is, I feel that I like giving back. You can watch my free content and in 2 to 3 years, be ready to be a CISO. But if you want to accelerate, if you want to get there quicker and faster, if you want to get there this year and within 6 months, then the CISO certification is the way to go. And just look at the testimonials. I mean, every time we jump on our CISO call, we just had one 2 weeks ago. 2 of the people are like, got a CISO job, got a CISO. It takes about 4 to 5 months. But if you do what I say, it's a proven formula. This formula has been proven. The metrics work. The data works. We have hundreds of students that have gone through it. So if you want to kickstart your career, the only thing I say is, I'm not in it for the money. So you need to be willing to commit for 6 months. I always tell people when I vet new folks for the program is, I'm not going to waste your time. Don't waste mine. If you're willing to commit for 6 months, I can get you where you need to be. If you want to do it on your own, watch my free content on YouTube and LinkedIn. I do a weekly podcast. I'll give you a ton of free info. But if you want to go to the next level, accelerate, and work with me directly, just email me ecole@secure-anchor.com. We'll jump on a call and see if you're a good fit.
Excellent. Well, on behalf of Virtual Testing Foundation, Dr. Eric Cole, I really want to thank you and thank you everyone who have listened to us. I'm sure this was helpful for you. And again, if you want to get in touch with Dr. Eric Cole, please reach out to him directly.
Excellent. Thank you, my friend, and appreciate the time.